Welcome to Marketing Signals, the podcast where we separate the noise from data in modern marketing. I'm Matt Bahr, CEO of Faring, and today we're diving into the world of marketing measurement. Joining me is Madan Bharadwaj, founder and CEO of M Squared, a bespoke attribution consultancy. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Hey, thank you so much for having Matt. It's having me on the show, Matt. Exciting. We've been talking about attribution measurement for a long time, and this is a long time coming. So excited to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. This is, I feel like the last two times we've met have been over some beers, so a little bit more formal this time, which is very exciting. Jumping into it, I was talking before we hit record here that you are one of the more pragmatic people in measurement, I'd say. Definitely a little bit different in your, let's say, level of dogma and the way you approach solving problems when it comes to measurement. I'm curious just to kick things off, and you can maybe allude to a little bit about your background, but where did you get to kind of how you think about measurement today? Like, where did this start and how did we get to now?
Yeah. So, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm the attribution guy in the industry. I've been doing this for a very, very long time, 15 plus years in measurement. So therefore, in some ways, I'm a one-trick pony. That's all I know, right? It's my fourth attribution company. Before this, I was co-founder of a company called Measured. And before that, I was founding team in a company called Visual IQ. Before that, I was doing attribution data science for an agency called Dentsu. So I've been in this space for a long time. And I grew up as a data scientist. I came out of grad school in computer science, and I went out to machine learning. And sort of at that time, it was not even called data science. So it was just classic machine learning engineering. So did a lot of data science kind of work, fell into ad tech. Grew up as a data scientist in ad tech, very, very early years. I'm talking about 2005, 6, when it was the heyday for search, right? And for bid optimization and agents for bidding and stuff like that. So really enjoyed doing that. I built a ton of models. I came out of grad school as a freshly minted machine learning guy who was like everything in the world was about data science. And then you get punched in the face a few times when you go to the industry and you say, like, no, settle down. It's a lot about common sense, a little bit of data science, right? And, I came out with the hammer. So to me, I'm looking for nails everywhere. Yeah. And then you walk in and people are spending $10 million like a month on something with like just very simple intuition about first principles intuition about how to do stuff. And I'm coming here with data science and really like complicated, sophisticated tools. And in many ways, what you kind of get humbled very, very quickly is that the world is too complex, incredibly complex. And a lot of times our common sense is very, very strong. Our intuition and common sense are actually quite strong models. If you think of it as a model, it's a pretty sophisticated, complex, and pretty robust model. And if you bring structured data science to it, you probably can improve it by 10, 20%. It's unlikely, it's very unlikely that, sometimes you'll get lucky and whatnot, you'll stumble on a great insight that you could have only found with data science. Majority of the times you're tuning, right? You're tuning it, and that's valuable. And that could be the big competitive edge, right? Getting 10, 20% better at bidding or forecasting or measurement or whatever it is could make the difference between you winning and losing. No question about that. But a lot of times, common sense answers tend to be very strong, right? And many times you use data science, you end up with nonsensical answers. You'll come back and say, it's nonsensical answers. So and as a data scientist, I very quickly learned the idea that you have to marry your data science with common sense intuition. And it's very unnatural for people to do. So it's another piece of background that is somewhat irrelevant, but my very first job was my own company I was in engineering undergrad back in India. I was a terrible engineer back then. So I was like, I'm not going to make any living doing this. So I was like, I got to do something else to make a living. So I was very entrepreneurial. I started a publishing company back while I was still in undergrad engineering school. I started a publishing company, an ad-supported magazine, physical magazine. So I'd go out, sell ad space. I would write all the content, publish it, and all that stuff. Long story short is that I learned very quickly that going and convincing somebody in real life, selling and convincing somebody and like doing something in real life is quite hard. And it takes real insight that for you to get somebody to take money out of their pocket and give it to you. So when I got into data science, I brought a lot of that with me, and I was naturally entrepreneurial. So as over a period of time, I was able to like blend my data science and my sort of more of pragmatic intuition into like became more of a product guy. Then I became more of an entrepreneur and sort of slowly became more and more senior. So my career trajectory has been a little bit like that. And that kind of reflects in how I approach measurement today, right? So when a lot of my measurement, I say is really measurement is about decision making. It's a decision support tool. If you think of it as a decision support tool, then all of a sudden I've been a vendor for a very, very long time, right? I remember after Visual IQ, I took my vendor jersey off and I became a consultant. So I put on the client jersey. The same problems, exactly same problems. I had so much faith in my tools. I said, these tools are multi-touch attribution is the veritable answer for measurement. So I would sell it like it's just sliced bread. I mean, you don't understand it yet, but it's sliced bread. When I took my vendor jersey off and I put on the client jersey on and I looked at the same problem, it looked incredibly complex. I'm like, oh shit, this thing is not even nearly solved. I'm only solving a portion of the problem. They have all of these other angles around the problem statement that is kind of unique to the business. There's no tools for it. And you have to now apply tooling plus intuition to some Excel, patchwork, and a lot of just deck work to kind of push through decisions. It kind of hit me in the face. I'm like, oh my God, now I get what my clients are facing, right? This is not a paint by numbers by even a remotest possibility, right? This is like a lot of application, and the world is moving on them all the time. Have incredibly complex jobs, and they're trying to convince other people to they're showing a piece of creative and asking for people's money, right? It's the hardest job in the world, right?
Yeah.
I really got respect for what my clients are doing, and now I became more and more practical about it. And the culmination of that is what I call triangulation. So what we call is the triangulation methodology, which is to bring together multiple sources of measurement, MMM-based, incrementality-based, last-click-based, post-purchase purposes, and then put them all side by side and synthesize a direction, spend more, spend less, spend a lot more, spend a lot less, right? And get more confidence on the direction. That becomes incredibly valuable when you do that. It's a very hard data problem. It's very heterogeneous. All the UTMs are broken. Everything looks different. So getting everything to line up in a way you can actually make that synthesized decision is super hard. It's a data problem. But that's what they're looking for. They want to make sure that when they make a business case for spend more on TV, there's one random data point that nobody has considered. Like, oh, you know what? The post-purchase survey said blah. And nobody thought about that. And the whole business case crumbles on that one random comment in a board meeting. And everybody has to go back to the drawing board. Why didn't we not think about that when we were putting the deck together? And this triangulation approach allows you to have a formal approach for synthesizing all the insights that you have had along the way. So you ask the question along the way somewhere and say, hey, what about the post-purchase survey data that said something else? Now you get to actually synthesize it and say, we believe in it, don't believe in it. Well, it's also pointing in the same direction or not. You have less faith, more faith, whatever. So you have a meaningful way to calibrate your decision based on all information, right? So a long way to say I've been punched in the face many times.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with this triangulation approach, which we very much agree with at Fairing, is over the last, call it 15 years, let's say when MTA was the source of truth, let's say. I think Google Analytics definitely helped push that message across, where marketers were very much they were only excited about advertising on channels that measurement methodology aligned to.
That's true.
Connected TV is so fascinating to me today, mainly because TV historically has always been for large brand awareness, huge investment, and it's definitely opened the door. And I think people are not giving enough credit to, there's obviously, it's arguably a new medium from a tracking and programmatic sense, but also methodologies have changed. MTA isn't this sort of imagine just using GA, or I was going to say GA4, but Universal Analytics, or and trying to invest in TV as a brand that's only doing a couple $100 million a year. You're not going to be able to know. And now we have new methodologies, and now these channels, channel diversity is it's a whole other argument as far as like, should you not focus, et cetera. But definitely from a business continuity and like understanding the deviations that could change or the output that could change in these, like it is definitely very important. I think these methodologies align to it. So I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about is like, we're less in a world where like we can only spend on XYZ because that's the only way that we can measurable.
That's right. The way I teach it in class is that we say that the world is super heterogeneous, especially in measurement. Now, the CTV tracking data, you might grab, somebody might give you IP-based attribution, okay? It's super choppy, it's super noisy, it's very correlational, but so is Google AdWords attribution, so is Facebook attribution, so is a lot of other things, right? So it's very heterogeneous, but there's a signal there. At least you get to see that, hey, I'm touching the people who are eventually converting, right? The targeting is somewhat working. It may not be incremental, maybe not, but at least the targeting is working, right? And you also have to take that in the context of how strong is the deterministic attribution possible? Is it strong or not, right? You take all that into account. You take whatever signal you can get from it. You do independent causal methods like MMM and lift testing, and then you marry the two to calculate what we call multipliers. Now, the whole point is that you want to borrow as much entropy and as much signal, as you would call in your podcast, right? As much signal as possible, and then use that for decision making. How do you do that? How do you not get dogmatic, as you very elegantly pointed out, with any one methodology? Like MMM, I think everything has to be MMM or only testing. It's actually not possible. The world is too complex. And as you said, the diversity is like getting, in many ways better. There's more and more diverse options, which is great for marketers, right? More options to reach audiences and inspire them to be part of their lives. But which also means the measurement has to move with it. And you can't take one-size-fits-all approach. It's simply not possible. And you have to focus on what is success. That they want to take their brands to market and be successful and be part of people's lives, right? Now, how can we measure that? That's what it needs to be about. As you rightly pointed out, if I say, well, I can measure whatever I can measure in multi-touch attribution, then that means that you're going to end up in a pool that's so small, super competitive. Now, there is no alpha left anymore. There's no competitive edge left anymore for you. And it's a sort of a losing proposition for many brands.
You mentioned multiplier. Can you just define that a little bit and how that can be used? It's very common we see it probably the most often in audio, like using promo codes and vanity URLs with survey data and using a multiplier on top of that. Yeah. It's obviously very popular in incrementality tests. Like, can you just, walk us through how multipliers are used?
I, in fact, learned about it working with clients. When I worked with, eBay and Instacart and all the big brands, they were already using this word called multipliers. They would call it different things. When I worked with Zillow, they would call it calibration coefficients. When I worked with eBay, they'll call it multipliers. They had this.
It's funny how like the naming convention here could either be signal complex or not. Yeah,
exactly. Depending on who named it, right? If a marketer named it as a data scientist. So, but the concept is the same. The concept is that you have independent methods like MMM, causal methods like MMM and incrementality testing that measure the lift. But you can't do lift testing on a daily basis or a weekly basis, monthly basis. You can only, honestly, you can do about 10 to 15 tests a year, okay? In a geo test, if you're talking about. Now, if you have to pick and choose what you test. So let's say you can do 3 or 4 Facebook tests a year, a couple of PPC tests a year, maybe a couple of TV tests a year. Let's say you ran a CTV test in Q1. But you're buying CTV on a daily basis, and you're having Roku reporting or Pandora reporting or CTV reporting from Trade Desk. Now, how do you report the causal impact for last week's buys and the last month's buys and whatnot? What you do is that you go back to the time when you ran the test. You look at what the lift you measured, and it's the lift is 3%, and that translates to 1,000 conversions. Okay, great. Yeah. What does Roku independently report from their last click numbers? They report 3,000 conversions. Okay, thank you so much. Now, 1,000 over 3,000 is 1/3, so 33% is a multiplier, right? Now, it gives you a cheat sheet. Now, it becomes like a big operational unlock. If you have a multiplier for CTV, for Facebook, for YouTube, for search and whatnot, now it's kind of sort of a matrix of multipliers. You download the daily reporting from the platforms, apply the multipliers, you get the estimated causal impact for every piece of investment on a daily basis. Now you can use that for buying and optimization, and this becomes your currency. It jumps over all the heterogeneity in the space and says, well, the Roku reporting is their own last click, and the Facebook reporting is their own last click. And affiliate is my UTM attribution, and something else is some other attribution. And they're all in different currencies. The multiplier kind of normalizes the currency to the brand's outcome currency. Now you get to have everything in your currency. And then you can also independently calibrate these multipliers. You can say, some of these channels, I don't care about the multipliers. I mean, I don't even buy them anymore. Okay, who cares about testing them? Whereas some channels are making decisions on the margins every day, and you're like, I need a test on that. This multiplier seems wonky for me. It doesn't seem to match. So you can keep running models on it, keep running tests on it, right? So it allows you to like independently work on the areas of the portfolio that it matter the most for you. And it's an operational unlock. It really opens up and allows you to work in a way that keeps up with the operational cadence and granularity that you need in a daily execution.
You run a consultancy. I feel like it's a consultancy as well as, I don't know if a school is the word that you want, but leaning a lot into education. And it's really interesting to see kind of how you guys have positioned yourself. And we've talked about the usage of tools and kind of this approach to getting better measurement. When you start to work with a client, like what is this? It seems like your philosophy is like, let me come in, let me tell you how to use the tools, which is arguably way more important than using the tool. I think a lot of people just want to plug and play measurement. And mainly because like the space is always changing and you need a framework more than anything else. Like you don't need a tool, you need a framework. How do you approach working with these organizations? And I think one of the common themes that's come up in the last few episodes of this podcast is culture, like a measurement culture, which is arguably the most important thing. Like if you don't have buy-in, if you don't have everyone kind of on the same page, it gets more and more difficult to execute or just change, let's say, the status quo. So I'm just curious, like it seems like your approach works so well, especially with these enterprise brands. It might be your pragmatism that it's just not like people are accepting of like, okay, we're going to work this together. But yeah, I'm curious how you've gotten there and what does the first steps look like?
What happens to us, Matt, as founders, right? You and I, we are tool found. We build tools, right? So it's kind of imprisons us in our tool in some ways, right? We're kind of like captive to selling our tool and our business interests, right? We raise money against it, and we don't have the permission to go out and independently just educate around the space, right? And I found it pretty challenging all my life. And so, in fact, I didn't start M Squared to build a tools company or a SaaS company or whatnot. It was originally just like a community. We had the big Slack community actually originally a small Slack community, which is bunch of measurement professionals hanging out and like hammering out best practices and doing courses and whatnot. And then it grew into a nice big community. We built a big sort of base of literature around best practices. Now we teach that, of course, transparently. The tools came after, right? The tools came after. What I found is that I don't even talk about the tools in the class. The tools are an afterthought. You talk about the problem statements and the framework, as you rightly pointed out, to approaching decision-making with data, right? How do you use measurement as decision support? That's the whole framework. What is the formal framework of thinking about decision-making in the context of uncertainty, in the context of media, right? How do you do that? How is measurement playing a role? How do you think about that? What is MMM's role here? What's testing's role here? How do you and then make it practical with actual case studies? And you need good foundation theory and whatnot, but of course, we all know that theory just does not get copy pasted. There's not paint by numbers. But how do you take these broad principles and then you apply it to brand A, brand B, brand C, and then you can see that, oh wait, that concept of this MMM, when I apply it here, it gave results that pointed in the right direction. Some of the results were incredulous. When we tested against that, we found that it was less incredulous because it now tightened up, but still very strong. So the investment thesis that we should invest in CTV as an example, MMM said the ROAS was 13. Like nothing is 13. That's too strong. But it's strong. It looks like it's strong. Let's run a test on it. It came back and said it's like probably 4.5 or 5. Well, 5 is very strong. The rest of my portfolio is 4.5. Yeah. It's probably the best investment at this point. But all my UTM numbers look like it's 0, right? So all of a sudden you have a different decision you're able to make because you're using measurement as a way to make a decision. But if you only focus on the uncertainty, if you said, oh, what's the band of uncertainty? If you think of it like a data scientist, what's the confidence bound on this, blah, blah. You run the stupid confidence interval and it'll be like, I can't make decisions on this because it looks like the bound is this big. But what they don't realize is that if you just calculate the confidence bound on the stupid last click numbers, they'll also be this big, right? And you won't be able to make any decisions on anything. Right? So relatively speaking, you have a ton of entropy to like borrow and make decisions. But that's the huge kind of like sort of shift in culture to think of decisions first, right? So you almost always start with what decisions are we looking to make and what data and measurement is going to support helping us making the right decision. All of a sudden, post-purchase surveys, right? I mean, I think your tool and product and case studies made it into my class at one point, right? We have a shared client of the Perfect Gene. The Perfect Gene was very kind to share the post-purchase survey data as part of my class. So we did a class where we showed how to use post-purchase survey as causal multipliers against last click. And we used it for TikTok and Facebook. And it turned out to be pretty accurate compared to an incrementality test, which we ran later. Much later, we ran an incrementality test and found that those multipliers compared to the post-purchase survey multipliers were very comparable. But post-purchase survey is not as granular. You can't do retargeting, prospecting. You can't do all the different breakouts. But, it's very affordable. It's real time. You can get something stood up. Now, for a small emerging brand, it's a DTC brand, amazing. It's like a amazing shot in the arm so that they can like throw a post-purchase survey tomorrow and then within a week they have results that are a good approximation of incrementality, right? Amazing. We teach that in the class. And I don't have any post-purchase survey tools to sell. I don't care. I mean, I just want to like be able to sell a methodology, not a sell, but teach, evangelize an approach or framework, allows you to take information, make better decisions. And that's all we teach, right? And we end up using whatever tools we can find to like advocate for making the right decisions, right? Now, when you think of it like that, what you'll find is that there is room for everybody here. There's room for testing tools, consultancies, in-house teams, open source model. This world is so big. The problems are so massively huge and they're moving on us all the time. The problems that like one of the most depressing things I would find in my last era of my career was I would set up an entire client and we would go through a solution architecture, set them up, and they'd be super successful. They'd like really scale into Facebook. And because we set up good tests for them, they learned Facebook and whatnot. And then I'll go off. Okay, these guys are set up. Okay, great. They're going to just, cut me a SaaS fee for the rest of their lives. I'm going to go work on some other client. 8 months after, they're like, well, we maxed out on Facebook. We're going to go try TV, or this go-to-market's kind of maxed out for us, or this product thesis didn't work out for us, so we're going back to the drawing board, and they churn on us. I'm like, it's very depressing, right? That's where I kind of learned that this model that it's a pure mousetrap model that we all have been sort of like, as founders, we raise money, we build essentially SaaS mousetraps. I find that's limiting for clients because it's just a tool that's useful for them in the journey along the way somewhere. And their journey is evolving all the time. So that's where my expert services kind of consultancy kind of was born, is that the expertise is what they're trying to buy. Even clients are buying tools. They're like, the only thing we're selling them is tools. Honestly, there's a marketplace of tools. Everybody is making tools. So what they're really trying to buy is Matt and Madan, right? They're like, Matt's a smart guy. He says a lot of smart things when I talk to him. How do I get Matt? And you're like, well, you can buy my tool. You can talk to me along the way. They're like, okay, I'll buy your tool because I want to talk to you. Yeah. And then I say it happened to me all the time. Then I was like, well, maybe I got to figure out an operating model that actually like works, that aligns with what the market's constantly telling me that they want. But I also have to make a living. So how do I do that in a way that that's what I'm trying to figure out, right? I think this idea of like, tools and services stacked up in a way that can be unbundled is the operating model.
It's the complexity of measurement which is driving that. Like it's not the absolute measurement is not something we'll ever discover or find because obviously for obvious reasons. So, and not even like a deterministic, obviously for the second point is not either. So it's not to that point, there isn't a perfect 100% that everyone can just get to, or you could do with the tool. It's that interpretation layer where a lot of that value comes from.
Interpretation towards a decision. And And we are trying to understand human behavior, right? If you think of what we're trying to do, Matt, you and I and everybody else in the space, ultimately we're trying to figure out if we have changed behavior. If I put a creative in front of somebody and they change behavior because of what we did, right? We're on Facebook or podcast or wherever it is, right? And we're trying to change people's behavior. In fact, it's probably the hardest thing to do. It's always been the hardest thing to do is change people's minds, right? And we're trying to measure how much people change their minds. And that's always going to be on the edge of our understanding. And we're always going to be in this place where we're trying to figure out how to measure this particular execution, that particular execution or not. So I guess we'll have jobs for a while.
To move on to the subject of MMMs and getting started for marketers, whether you're a data scientist or not, you alluded to open source tools. And I feel like now we have this more often than not than before updated tool, like whether it's Robyn, Meridian, PyMC, it goes on and on. And I think one of the things that I've heard recently, even with maybe using one of these LLMs to help kind of navigate this. And I guess the other open source MMM is just using Excel and drawing a regression on some of these things. So it's a very wide space.
That's right.
And I hear often of doing an MMM in-house. And I think that's a really valuable step, or at least learning, maybe not relying on that. But I'm curious how you're viewing, obviously Robyn is I'm not going to say make Meta look better, but it's built in a way that helps Meta measure Meta. And Meridian is the same for Google. There's certain biases in the way those models are created. So there's arguably not a one size fits all, depending on your business, maybe. But I'm curious how you think about these open source tools in the market and their place, and should brands, obviously on the larger end, obviously I would recommend using an open source tool than trying to start from day zero. But yeah, curious how you think about these tools, because they are coming up way more often. It's funny how MMM and Incrementality are kind of back in, and now there's this quote unquote free. Nothing's free, obviously, but way to get an output, let's call it, to help you get moving on that.
It's a calculator in some ways, right? If you know what to do with a calculator, then you're going to get much further, as opposed to using a pencil and paper to calculate some really complex math, right? So that's what these tools are. This particular point of opinion is going to be pretty controversial. I'm going to say that long back when I would build a company around measurement, I would write these models. I would write a proprietary media mix modeling library. I would write an MTL library. And my entire company was built around that library, okay? And the whole thing was protecting the IP and selling the IP and all that stuff, right? That's all. We all did that. Now, it's basically open source, and you can argue that proprietary models are marginally better for certain use cases and whatnot, and they are. As I said, practically speaking, when you look at it from a decisioning perspective, and you commit it from a marketer's perspective, it'll find that the incremental entropy you'll get of using this model with some other model, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to build a model, multiple versions of the model, right? And then the big wins are not in the modeling algorithm anymore. The algorithm is kind of in a box, and it's really super powerful, right? What it is to understanding how to model the business is the big sort of breakthrough. Okay, for example, working in business last month, we were looking. There are kind of a multi-location healthcare business, dermatology clinics. And we've been looking at leads all along. So they would say they'll generate a lead online, and they'll send the lead to the local clinic. The clinic will call you and be like, hey, you want to come in and do a procedure, right? And show up, and that's the whole business. We've been building the models like that. We're like, you know what? These models look wonky. They don't look perfect, and they're not great models. And also the business kind of looks like in the naked eye, I could see that there is clear patterns. There are two different customer segments here mushed together. And I think we should break it up, do some exploratory data analysis, and say, almost certainly I believe that you have repeat customers and new customers. They have very different behaviors. And for the longest time, we didn't look at the data. It was sitting somewhere deep in the data warehouse. It was just not part of how business thought about it. Then we're like, you know what, got to get that. So we go in and get the data, break it up, and new and returning customers, completely different. The model now says what channels. We were always thinking repeat customers were free. All the repeat business was just going to walk in the door because they came in, they liked us, they came back. So media should have no impact. Turns out that's not the case at all. There's a lot of reminder. Like if you just fact that you show up and it reminds them to go back to the clinic, it's kind of sparks a huge kind of like almost 50% of the business was incremental to the media. It's none thought of, right? Then we're like, well, this business grew up in California. It's been there for, 25 years, 30 years there. The rest of the country, they've kind of built over a period of time. There's a lot of awareness in California. And it's a big part, half the business is in California. They're like, you know what? We have a sense that California is a different business than the rest of the country. So we built different models. One model for California, one model for the rest of the country. And turns out media was...
interesting.
The baseline in California was 75%. Media was only 25% incremental. The rest of the country, media was 95% incremental. There was no baseline to the business. If you stop media, the clinics would just go empty, right? Whereas in California, if you stop the media, 3/4 of the business would just walk in the door, no matter what, right? Now, I could have built these models in my own, if I could have written a really fancy proprietary algorithm. I could use PyMC, I could use, Robyn, I could use. That's not where I got the juice. The juice is to be able to think through what to model and break up the business in a way that's meaningful. And this concept we call marketing accounting frameworks, MAF, okay? What's the right marketing accounting framework for this business? How do you break up the business into what we call P&Ls? New customer P&L, returning customer P&L, or California P&L, rest of the country P&L, right? How do you break it up into P&Ls and then model it in that particular way and then roll it up back into a spreadsheet that looks like a P&L that your CFO would submit back to the board? That is the breakthrough. When you do that right, all of a sudden you have very different creative insights. We believe that's where a lot of the decisioning value and the decisioning entropy is coming. If now that I'm in this side of the world where I don't have a tool that I'm sort of married to, I can use open source tools. I have the permission to say that. Well, if you have a tool that you've been building for the last 7 years, you don't have the permission to say that, right? Yeah. It's a big part of it's liberating, but at the same time, I was a founder. I was on the other side where I would struggle to have this point of view. So it's a part of the structural inefficiencies for how the market has grown up over a period of time.
It's a beautiful example of the complexities of measurement. Like, even if we don't, like, let's say it's not a physical location and you're running geolifts in certain demographics where maybe your frequency or impression volume over the last 2 or 3 years has been like 10x Mississippi, or like a country that maybe you're not as penetrated in. And the output of that experiment, that lift test, is going to be different, not maybe because factors that are easily measured in that sense, but something that is more historical in nature that maybe not some. Yeah, it's a great example of how you have to think about slicing and dicing different cohorts when you're using these different methodologies, and why, just spinning up a lift test or maybe relying on conversion lift tests and platform. Like, there's a lot of nuance.
This is the point I wanted to make before, is that I grew up as a data scientist, but I had a natural curiosity for business because I was an entrepreneur first and had a natural curiosity for business. I wasn't worried about getting lost in the complexity of my client's business, right? Like learning about LaserAway, learning about Zillow, learning about whoever clients. It's a lot to learn in a business, and it can be pretty overwhelming, but for whatever reason I enjoy learning about the businesses and like just the nuances of it and whatnot. It's pretty intellectually stimulating. And then I'm bringing all the expertise on measurement overlay on that and finding that like the middle ground that is the best of both worlds. That's like an art and a science. So you got to like bring those two things together. It's fun to do. When you do that, you get the creative big sort of bumps in like value. We're always chasing that. In my practice, we're always chasing where is that next bit of consumer insight, customer insight that's going to help us break through and create additional creative value, either in demand or spend or whatever it is, right? So pretty challenging, no question about that.
Yeah, very. Yeah. Just to wrap things up here with a final question, what is one measurement or attribution myth you wish every marketer would stop believing? And another way to phrase that is like, what is your biggest hurdle when you start working for a brand?
Great question, man. So I'll tell you, it used to be like MTA many years back. I would have said it's MTA, last click, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. How often does that come up now? Just out of curiosity.
I think the idea that last click is broken is universal. Everybody is now buys into the fact that last click is not the right approach, right? But the thing is, so what? What is the right approach? Okay, I don't know. Okay, that's great. I'm broken. I understand that. But how do I fix myself? Is there a particular recipe for that? And the clarity around that is what they're all kind of searching for, right? So they all understand incrementality testing. They all understand MMM is the right sort of tools for it. How they come together for me. I mean, I ran an MMM internally. Somebody else runs an MMM. They have completely different answers, chalk and cheese, right? Is this thing like ready? I don't have the time for a science experiment. Okay, it needs to be ready for me, right? That is the place where the biggest challenge for them. There are a lot of people have burnt their fingers trying different things, and that's primarily where I struggle with, to educate people in a way that, hey, there is a framework. And also, there's a lot of easy button solutions that we've sold, right? I mean, you and I are founders. We've kind of done that before. We're like, hey, this is an easy button. I've kind of solved the problem. It's in a box right now for you. Just, open it, hit a button. It's going to give you the answer, right? Well, it turns out we're not there yet on measurement. It's like a far away from that. It's a process. It's like a program. You stand up a program. It's like going to the gym, right? If you use data to make decisions on a regular basis in a thoughtful, critical thinking kind of a way, do it for 3 quarters straight, no question your business is going to improve. Without question, right? You can just use post-purchase surveys alone. But you use it methodically, repeatedly, you use it in a way that you're stacking up the insights one over the other. No matter what, you're going to get better, right? But trying to do it for 2 weeks and saying, okay, my business, the Shopify is not going up, so clearly I'm not doing something right, and go chase the next shiny object, that's super challenging, right? It's very hard when you have brands you're like trying to advocate to like staying on the track for a longer period of time so they can see business outcomes. While you and I run businesses, they are bleeding. They're like, dude, I don't have 3 freaking quarters for your science experiment.
To figure this out.
Right. I need answers now. How do you advocate and say, well, yeah, but consumers are not going to change their minds overnight. It takes a bit. This is the right expectation to have. How do you set that expectation, meet the expectation, and hope the universe kind of like bounces a few balls your way along the way? That's the place where it's pretty challenging. Yeah, but it's fun. I mean, that's part of us all trying to figure out how to make the world better. So taking one brick at a time.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I think that whether it's MMM, it is interesting seeing these methodologies from a frequency perspective, like trying to condense them as much as possible so that you can get output faster. But yeah, to your point, like I always go back to this great blog called Occam's Razor. By one of the Google evangelists, essentially, who was like helping build GA years ago. And he had this like ladder of success. And it was like starting with like looking at your click-through rate, your bounce rate, before you even look at your conversion rate. Like it's like what ladders up. And I think in the measurement space, it is also very similarly, where if you just try to jump right to an MMM, you want results right away, you're going to be in a lot of pain, versus if you think about it, it's like, what are my ladders of success to get to measurement? And like that holy grail is like a full stack. It is, to your point, it's triangulation. It's using multiple methodologies versus a one size fits all, pay and play, grow my business.
You made a great point. I think one advice I always give my clients is you're a marketer, you're a founder, you have an intuition about your business. You just bring it because you built it from the ground up, or maybe you're working on the business for the last 2 years, 3 years. You have a certain intuition for the business. Don't throw it away. Take whatever data you have to inform it and tune it. Maybe some intuition's right, some is off. You tune it and tune it and tune it and use that for strategy. Use your data-informed intuition to drive strategy. Now you have a sort of a way to calibrate yourself to kind of get better and better with your decisions, as opposed to trying to like just go all in and say, okay, I don't go to the gym, but I'm going to run an Ironman tomorrow, right? It's very challenging. Yeah. Great awesome way to set this up. Yeah.
Thanks again for coming on the pod. Again, highly recommend everyone go check out Madan's M Squared for just learnings, the course, etc. Like probably one of the best sources of knowledge when it comes to measurement on the internet. Is there any other place they should look out for you or ways to follow?
I live on LinkedIn, unfortunately. I make a home there. So, if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm always on LinkedIn. That's my unfortunate life. But hey, I enjoy all the thought leadership. I've been a fun, like hanging out with you and learning about your business as well. So I'm a big fan of Fatting and what you do for clients. Appreciate the partnership. And guys, if you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on msquared.com, msquared.club. We also have a masterclass coming up once a quarter. The next one's end of April. So come to my class. I'll see you there.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks, man.